In ancient Egyptian belief, the pantheon was vast, comprising over 2,000 gods and goddesses, each worshipped in temples, shrines, and homes. While it's impossible to cover every deity in such a complex system, this video will focus on the key figures within the pantheon. In a previous video, I explored some of the central gods and goddesses of Egyptian mythology, including Ra, Osiris, Isis, Horus, Set, Ma'at, Anubis, and Thoth. In this video, we'll delve into 7 more influential deities: Shu, Tethnut, Geb, Nut, Nephthys, Hathor, and Sekhmet, further enriching our understanding of ancient Egyptian spirituality. Let's begin with the creation myth. At the dawn of creation, only dark, lifeless waters existed. From these primeval waters, a mound of land arose, and with it, the sun ascended into the sky, bringing light to the world. The location of this primordial mound varies depending on the myth, with Heliopolis, Hermopolis, and Memphis serving as key centers for these stories. Each city offers a distinct narrative that highlights different gods and goddesses as central to the story. In this video, I'll focus on the creation myth from Heliopolis, the most widely known version, while myths from Hermopolis and Memphis will be addressed in a future video. According to the Heliopolitan creation story, the self-created god Adam existed within the primordial waters before the world began. When the mound of land emerged, Adam stood upon it to create the universe. In a moment of divine action, Adam sneezed, and from his breath, the first pair of gods were born: Shu, the god of air, and Tefnut, the goddess of moisture. Shu and Tethnut gave birth to the twin gods Geb, the god of earth, and Nut, the goddess of the sky. Geb and Nut had 4 children: Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys, forming the core forces of life. These 9 gods, Adam, Shu, Tethnut, Geb, Nut, Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys, constituted the Ennead, a term derived from the Greek word enneas, meaning group of 9. Adam, as their creator, was also credited with bringing forth every aspect of the world, establishing him as the central figure in Egyptian cosmology. In part 1 of this series, I discussed the first 4 members of the Ennead: Adam, Ra, Osiris, Isis, and Set. Now, in part 2, we will examine the remaining 5 deities, beginning with the air god Shu and the moisture goddess Tethnut. Shu and Tethnut, initially living joyously on the primeval mound under the protective gaze of Ra Adam, eventually wandered off into the darkness one fateful night, becoming lost. When Ra discovered their absence, he sent his only eye to search for them, enduring temporary blindness as a result. In his sorrow, Ra created a new eye. After some time, the original eye found Shu and Tethnut, now grown, and brought them back to Ra. The reunion brought Ra such joy that he wept tears of happiness. From each tear that fell, a human being was created. However, the original eye grew envious of Ra's new eye and, in honor of it, Ra transformed the first eye into a cobra and placed it upon his forehead as the uraeus. This cobra became an enduring symbol of protection and divine authority. Shu, the god of air, was a member of the Ennead of Heliopolis, and his name translates to "he who rises up." Shu is typically depicted as a man with a false beard and an ostrich feather on his headband, symbolizing the breath of life. Sometimes, he appears as a lion alongside his sister and wife, Tefnut, symbolizing the 2 lions that guarded the eastern and western borders of ancient Egypt. Shu also had a role in the underworld, where he was known as the guardian of the ladder. During the weighing of the heart, if the deceased passed the test, they would climb a ladder held by Shu to reach heaven. As a cosmic deity, Shu did not have dedicated temples. He could be invoked everywhere through prayers. Tefnut, the goddess of moisture and rainfall, was both the sister and wife of Shu, the god of air. She was also a member of the Ennead. Her name means, one who spits. Along with Shu, Tethnut was the first creation of Adam and the mother of Geb and Nut. She is often depicted as a woman with the head of a lioness, wearing a sun disk adorned with 2 cobras or uraeus as her headdress, holding both an ankh and a was scepter. Tethnut was sometimes confused with Sekmet, as both goddesses shared the lioness head, but Tethnut's ears were pointed, while Sekhmet's ears were rounded. Tefnut was primarily worshipped in Leonpolis and Hermopolis, although her influence extended across Egypt. Tefnut played a protective role in safeguarding Ra during his daily journey across the sky and his nightly journey through the underworld. As the goddess of moisture, Tefnut was believed to make the land fertile with her tears. In one myth, she quarreled with Ra and left him, taking moisture and water with her. This act caused the land to dry up, bringing drought and famine. To restore balance, Ra sent the god Thoth to retrieve her. Thoth disguised himself as a baboon to approach her, and after a brief confrontation, Tefnut was persuaded to return, bringing rain and moisture back to Egypt. Shu and Tethnut had twin children, Geb and Nut, both of whom were members of the Ennead of Heliopolis. As the god of the earth, Geb was believed to be responsible for fertility, the abundance of crops, and bountiful harvests. He was also regarded as the god of caves and mines, with dominion over precious stones and minerals found beneath the earth. In ancient times, earthquakes were believed to be caused by Geb's laughter. Geb was depicted in various forms, often shown in human form with a false beard, a goose on his head, and vegetation on his body. The Egyptian pharaohs were closely associated with Geb, referring to themselves as the heir of Geb. The throne was known as the seat of Geb, and Egypt was called the house of Geb. During coronations, Geb was invoked to witness the transfer of power from one pharaoh to the next. The ancient Egyptians also worshipped Geb for his role in ensuring good harvests, fertility, and protection from snakes and other dangers. Nut, on the other hand, was known by many titles, including goddess of the sky, stars, cosmos, astronomy, and the universe. She was typically depicted as a nude woman adorned with stars, arching over the earth. Her fingers and toes were said to touch the four cardinal directions: north, south, east, and west. In some depictions, she is also shown with a waterpot sign on her head. Nut also had close ties to the afterlife, and her image was often painted on the lids of sarcophagi, symbolizing her protection of the deceased. It was believed that Nut carried the dead into the starry sky, where she provided them with sustenance. Some myths tell of Nut swallowing the sun each night and giving birth to it anew each morning. Though she had no dedicated temple, Nut's image could be found in many temples, including those at Dendera and Edfu. The myth of Geb and Nut's separation is a central story in Egyptian mythology. When Geb, god of the earth, and Nut, goddess of the sky, were born, they clung to each other. However, their father, Shu, the god of air, had to separate them by placing himself between them, symbolizing the separation of the earth and sky by air. Geb was heartbroken to be apart from Nut, and his sorrow caused him to cry, creating the world's oceans. Meanwhile, when the world was first created, there were only 360 days in a year. Ra decreed that Nut could not give birth on any of the days he had created. However, Thoth intervened, gambling with the moon and winning 5 extra days for Nut. These 5 days allowed Nut to give birth to her children, Osiris, Set, Isis, and Nephthys. Despite Ra's anger, he eventually acknowledged Thoth's cleverness and wisdom. The 4 children of Geb and Nut, Osiris, Set, Isis, and Nephthys, played significant roles in ancient Egyptian mythology and became some of the most important gods. Osiris and Isis became husband and wife, while Set and Nephthys were paired together. However, in one myth, Anubis was born from an affair between Nephthys and Osiris. A member of the Ennead of Heliopolis, Nephthys was a funerary goddess often associated with protecting the dead. She was also considered a protector of childbirth and a practitioner of magic. Together with Isis, Nephthys was believed to possess the combined strength to defeat any demon. While Nephthys and Isis were similar in appearance, their headdresses distinguished them. Nephthys had a temple enclosure, while Isis featured a throne hieroglyph. Nephthys was worshipped in numerous temples across Egypt, including those in Dendera, Philae, Heliopolis, and Abydos. In inscriptions on the walls of many of these temples, she was identified as the supreme goddess of Upper Egypt. The last 2 goddesses I will discuss are Hathor and Sekhmet. In some accounts, Hathor and Sekhmet are considered the same goddess, taking on different forms. This is not unusual for goddesses. For example, in the Hindu tradition, Parvati, the wife of Shiva, has three forms: Parvati, Durga, and Kali. In other accounts, Hathor and Sekhmet are seen as separate deities. They are, in fact, sisters and children of Ra. In the version where Hathor and Sekhmet are distinct entities, it is believed that Sekmet was created from the fire in Ra's eye when he gazed upon the earth, becoming the Eye of Ra. Hathor was one of the most revered goddesses in the Egyptian pantheon, often regarded as the most beautiful of all the deities. She was known by many titles, including the goddess of love, beauty, sexuality, music, dance, sky, motherhood, and queenhood. Along with Horus and Harsamtus, she formed the triad of Edfu. Throughout ancient Egypt, numerous temples were dedicated to Hathor, with the Temple of Hathor at Dendra being the oldest and most famous. Hathor was commonly depicted as a cow with a sun disk between her horns or as a woman with the head of a cow. She was also often shown as a beautiful woman wearing a red sheath dress, with a headdress of horns and a sun disk. In some representations, she appeared as a human face with bovine ears. As the goddess of the sky, Hathor accompanied Ra during his daily journey across the sky, defending him from his enemies. In the afterlife, Hathor took on the role of guiding the deceased to a place where they could receive food and drink to sustain them for eternity, earning the title, Goddess of the Western Mountain. To protect herself and keep demons away from the dark realm, she wore a bracelet adorned with 42 stars for protection. She was associated with many festivals, often centered around drinking and dancing. For example, in the Festival of Drunkenness, she was honored as the Lady of Drunkenness and the Goddess of Music and Dance. As for Sekmet, as Ra grew old, he observed that humanity had become sinful and disrespectful toward him. In response, he decided to punish them. He gathered all the gods and goddesses and sought their advice. It was suggested that Ra send his daughter Hathor to deal with those who opposed him. Ra followed this counsel and sent Hathor, who transformed into the lioness goddess Sekmet, to the mortal world. Sekmet went on a ferocious rampage, terrifying the people and spreading bloodshed across the earth. Witnessing the mass destruction, Ra decided to intervene and stop her. However, Sekmet became consumed by the bloodshed and reveled in the destruction. Ra was deeply saddened by the devastation caused to humanity, yet he also grew angry at Sekmet for refusing to cease her rampage and return to him. To stop her, Ra, along with the other gods, sent 7,000 jars of wine to Dendra. The wine was dyed red to resemble blood, which Sekmet greatly favored. When Sekmet arrived to continue her destruction, she mistook the wine for blood and drank it eagerly until she passed out. Upon waking, she was transformed back into Hathor, a peaceful goddess who cherished humanity. Due to her role, Sekmet is known as the goddess of war and destruction. Her name is often translated as, she who is powerful, or, the one who loves Ma'at. Sekmet is typically depicted as a lion-headed woman, wearing a sun disk and uraeus on her head, often holding an ankh while seated or standing with a scepter. Along with Ta, her husband, and Nephthys, her son, she formed the Triad of Memphis. Statues of Sekmet have been found in many temples across Egypt, including the mortuary temple complex of Amenhotep III at Qam el-Haytham and the Temple of Mut at the Karnak complex in Luxor. Sekmet was believed to have the ability to breathe fire, cause plagues, and bring about famines. These same powers allowed her to be invoked as a goddess of healing, capable of warding off such disasters. The ancient Egyptians revered Sekmet, believing that she held the cure for every health ailment. Offerings such as food, drink, incense, or music were made to appease her, ensuring their prayers would be answered. In follow-up videos, I will discuss the remaining important gods and goddesses of ancient Egypt. If you find this topic interesting, please like and subscribe.